Hey everybody, this is Pastor Rory, and I want to share a little bit about what I consider to be probably one of the worst and most destructive practices that often takes place amongst zealous Christians in modern Christianity. You say, what is that? It's simply this. It's the erroneous practice of picking unripened fruit. Picking unripened fruit. Now, what is that? Well, think about it. If you have a pear growing on a tree or some other fruit growing on a tree and it's still green, it's still hard. It's there, you can see it's growing, but you pick it before the time. That fruit will never come to maturity and it will be useless. It will be spoiled. You have to wait until it's mature. You have to wait until it's ripened. And I made this mistake many, many times as a new convert. When I was doing missions work in Mexico as a teenager, I remember one time going to a house and sharing the gospel with a particular lady there. And I remember thinking, I'm going to get her now to say a prayer with me to become a Christian. And if I would have asked her to do it at that moment, I think she would have said yes. But the man that was there, who was like our leader, he said, no, don't do it. Hold off. She's not ready. And I remember thinking, man, this guy is so evil. What sort of a Christian is he? If we had her right there, we'd just say this prayer with her and it'll be done. And he's like holding it off. Well, a few days later, probably a week or so, the whole scene had shifted. Now she was broken. Now she was convicted. And we prayed with her, and it was a genuine conversion to my knowledge. I'll never forget that, but I still didn't get the lesson. It took me many years and many failures in this area to understand that people are not converted by the force of my will or my zeal, but by the work of the Holy Spirit taking place in their heart. Now, sometimes people can be emotionally manipulated by our zeal, by our excitement, and we can push them into something that's actually not taking place in their hearts by the Holy Spirit. It's not of their own volition. They're just kind of being dragged along. So often what happens in these cases is if you push somebody to some sort of a profession of faith before they're really convicted of their sins, or before they're really convinced that Jesus is the Son of God and that they must follow him, what will happen is nothing, first of all. They won't experience anything. The Spirit of God will not come to dwell in them. They will not get a sense of forgiveness of sins. They will not have a joy within them and a new life. But they'll start going through the motions of Christianity, and usually in a very short period of time, they'll just walk away. And what happens is they think they've experienced Christianity. Probably a lot of atheists today, or a lot of people that are totally anti-Christianity, they think they were once a Christian. That was kind of their experience. They were never genuinely converted. They just made some sort of a profession of faith, probably by the zeal of maybe their parents or a friend or something like that. But in reality, nothing took place in their heart. They never came to a conviction of sin. They never came to truly know God. They were green fruit. Maybe they were responding to the kindness of a Christian, or they came to church. That's good, and we're thankful for when that happens. But we have to be very careful not to pick green fruit. I heard the story many years ago when I was ministering in China of an American missionary that was a teacher at a university there teaching English. And during one semester, he had all of his students at some point come into his apartment where he lived. And before they left, he would have them all say what's known as the sinner's prayer. Now, these young Chinese students, they didn't know anything about God. They didn't know anything about Christianity. But in the zeal of this man, he thought that if they just said this prayer, they would be saved, even though they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know who God is. They don't know anything. And the reality is, it's a mockery of Christianity, actually. And it does much more harm than it does good. And this really is a great error that we have in modern Christianity. I got that phrase from a Norwegian missionary, Marie Monsen, who, when she was in China in the 30s and the 40s, she experienced genuine revival. But that was one of the very important lessons that the Holy Spirit drove home to them as they were going about China, going to different cities and reaping a harvest of souls, is not to pick unripened fruit. Be very careful about picking green fruit. It's much more difficult to wait for God to work, but that's the way it has to be done. And if we try to accomplish the work of God by the strength of our flesh, which is why that happens. That's why we pick unripened fruit, because we're pushing for something to happen before the time. It will cause a disaster. It'll be just like Abraham and Ishmael and the whole experience, the disastrous result of Abraham trying to accomplish the will of God by human wisdom, human zeal, human desire. In the end, it was a disaster. God had Isaac on the way, but they were not willing to wait for God to do it. And that's so often a curse that plagues modern Christianity. Now, I want to be gentle the way that I say this, because usually the people that are committing this error are the people that are very sincere, very genuine, very zealous Christians, often new believers. But unfortunately, it doesn't make a difference. If we're sincere or not, it still has the potential to cause great harm. So we have to learn to wait on God and wait for God to do a complete work, but it's worth the wait. May God help us to not pick unripened fruit, but to wait for the real thing. God bless.